The suitcase tumbled down marble steps, her belongings scattered like broken promises, while rain turned designer clothes into evidence of his cruelty. She was pregnant, homeless, with nothing. But he didn't know he was creating the very monster that would destroy him. Sometimes when someone throws you into the abyss, you discover you have wings. You know that moment when your entire world collapses, when the person you trusted most becomes your greatest enemy, when you're left with nothing but the life growing inside you and a choice. That's where our story begins, with a suitcase falling down marble steps, with a pregnant woman thrown into the storm, with a man so confident in his power he never saw his own destruction walking away in the rain. Her clothes scattered everywhere, designer dresses now soaked and ruined, just like the dreams she once had. But as she knelt there, gathering the pieces of her former life, her hand instinctively moved to protect the life growing inside her. Have you ever felt the moment when victim becomes warrior, when desperation transforms into determination? The security guards made sure she couldn't return. This wasn't just exile. This was erasure. But what they didn't understand was that the child she carried would become her first ally in a war he didn't know had started. His final words echoed in the rain. "You're nothing without my name, nothing without my money, you'll see." He had no idea she had helped draft the prenup he waved like a victory flag. Late nights when he thought she was reading magazines, she was studying contract law. Dinner parties where she seemed to zone out, she was listening to his lawyer friends discuss loopholes and legal strategies. Every clause designed to keep her powerless would eventually strangle his empire. She took one last look at the house that was never home, memorizing every window, every door, every weakness she would exploit when she returned. Not as his discarded wife, but as its owner. The woman walking into that storm wasn't a victim. She was a phoenix, and she had just felt her first flame. The homeless shelter smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams, but for her it became something else entirely, a war room. Surrounded by other discarded women, she began building the network that would eventually topple his throne. "First time here?" asked Maria, a woman with tired eyes. "Last time," she replied quietly, one hand still protective over her growing belly. The other women smiled sadly. They'd heard that determination before, but there was something different about her. While others talked about survival, she talked about strategy. Her pregnancy became her strategic advantage. The world sees a pregnant woman and thinks vulnerability, but she understood that underestimation was the most powerful weapon of all. Public libraries became her classroom. Between prenatal appointments, she studied business law, corporate acquisition strategies, hostile takeover tactics. The government assistance forms taught her his vulnerabilities. Every question about income, assets, and business ownership showed her exactly which agencies investigate men like him. Each humiliating moment in those welfare lines became fuel. Every condescending look from social workers, every form that reduced her to a number fed the fire that would eventually consume everything he owned. Have you ever been so broken that you became unbreakable? She transformed every moment of desperation into motivation. The shelter became her recruiting ground. Every woman with a story of abuse, every mother fighting for custody, every survivor of a system designed to keep them powerless. She listened to their pain and began weaving it all together into something beautiful and terrible, a movement disguised as survival. The business loan came through on a Tuesday, built on lies, secured with forged references, funded by banks that never looked too closely. But she had learned from the master of deception himself. Her daughter became her unwitting partner in the most sophisticated corporate espionage operation anyone had ever seen. Daycare meetings that were actually investor pitches, playground conversations that revealed insider trading opportunities, mommy groups where wives of board members shared secrets they didn't know were valuable. The patents she filed came from memory, conversations from their marriage where he had bragged about innovations stolen from smaller companies. Now those ideas belonged to her, legally, officially, ironically. She began systematically recruiting his enemies, every former employee he had fired, every competitor he had crushed, every supplier he had cheated. They all wanted to see him fall, and she offered them something they had never had before, a leader who understood his weaknesses from the inside. The meetings happened in coffee shops and playgrounds. Casual encounters that looked like coincidence, but were planned with military precision. A network of allies united by shared pain and common purpose. Her business grew slowly, carefully. A cleaning service that happened to work in buildings where his competitors operated. A consulting firm that specialized in helping companies recover from hostile takeovers. Each business was legitimate, profitable, above board. But together they formed something more dangerous than any single corporation. They formed a web. The school fundraiser looked like any other PTA event, but for her, it was the launch of the most sophisticated hostile takeover in corporate history. The networking was masterful. PTA meetings where she gathered intelligence disguised as small talk. Parent-teacher conferences that became opportunities to connect with spouses of key executives. Birthday parties where tipsy fathers revealed confidential business information to someone they saw as just another mom. Her daughter's resemblance to him became a weapon she wielded with surgical precision. The child had his eyes, his smile, his stubborn chin. Every boardroom photo he displayed now included the face of a child he had abandoned. Her discovery of his company's fatal weakness came through their daughter's medical records. A routine pediatric appointment led her to discover discrepancies in his corporate health plans. The regulatory violations were hiding in plain sight. She began documenting everything with the methodical precision that only a mother protecting her child could achieve. Every discrepancy, every violation, every piece of evidence that painted a picture of systematic fraud spanning decades. But she was patient. She understood that premature action would give him time to cover his tracks. So she waited and planned and built her case brick by brick. The shell companies began purchasing his debt on a Thursday. LLCs with innocuous names buying mortgages, loans and obligations from banks that had no idea they were selling to his former wife. Phoenix Holdings acquired his corporate headquarters mortgage. Rising Sun Limited purchased the loans on his manufacturing facilities. Each transaction legitimate, each purchase above board, each company owned by the woman he had thrown pregnant into the rain. The employees who remembered her kindness became her informants without realizing they were part of an operation. The janitor who had always received her genuine smile. The secretary she had treated with respect when others saw her as furniture. Her manipulation of his board meetings was a masterpiece of psychological warfare, using knowledge of their personal weaknesses to influence votes against his interests. The moment she realized she owned more of his company than he did came on a quiet Tuesday evening. Through a web of subsidiaries so complex it looked like abstract art, she had achieved controlling interest in Harrison Enterprises. The man who had thrown her away for being nothing now worked for her. Have you ever felt the sweet justice of invisible victory? Every cost-cutting measure he implemented made her acquisitions easier. Every employee he fired created another potential ally. Every corner he cut created another legal vulnerability she could exploit. He was systematically destroying his own empire, and she was there to buy the pieces at bargain prices. The annual shareholder meeting was supposed to be a formality, but this year was different. She walked into the boardroom wearing a simple black dress and carrying a leather folder that contained the end of his world. Her daughter walked beside her, 6 years old and curious. "Daddy works here," the little girl whispered. "Not anymore, sweetheart." "But we do." The silence when she entered was deafening. He looked up, and the blood drained from his face. The woman he had discarded, sitting in the front row of shareholders, looking at him with the calm patience of someone who had been planning this moment for years. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we begin today's proceedings, I believe there are some ownership changes that need to be disclosed." Recognition dawned on his face like sunrise over a graveyard. The moment he realized every business disaster of the past 5 years bore her invisible signature. "This is impossible," he whispered. "You can't—" "Controlling interest? Actually, I do. Acquired through a series of perfectly legal transactions over the past 5 years. I believe the technical term is hostile takeover, though I prefer to think of it as justice." Her presentation was devastating in its thoroughness. Years of evidence presented with the clinical precision of a prosecutor who had never lost a case. The pattern of fraud documented here spans 15 years and involves systematic theft of intellectual property, securities fraud, tax evasion, and regulatory violations that put this company and its shareholders at severe legal risk. Have you ever watched someone's entire world collapse in real time? The board members who had once hung on his every word now looked at him like a stranger. The empire he had built through deception was dissolving, and the woman he had thrown away was holding the keys to whatever remained. The meeting ended with his resignation, not a choice but an ultimatum. His desperate attempts to buy her silence began that afternoon. "Name your price," he begged. "Half of everything, 3/4, all of it. Just make this stop." "You still don't understand," she replied calmly. "I don't want your money. I never did. I wanted justice, and justice isn't for sale." The press conference that destroyed his reputation was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Standing before cameras with legal documents that proved his systematic fraud, she spoke with quiet authority. "The evidence presented here today represents not just corporate malfeasance but a pattern of behavior that destroys lives for profit." His family faced the choice that would define them for generations. One by one they chose her, not because they loved her more, but because they couldn't ignore the truth she had documented. The systematic abuse, the stolen innovations, the lives destroyed in the pursuit of profit. The federal investigation she had orchestrated was already in motion, anonymous tips that led authorities to evidence she had been collecting for years. Agent Martinez sat across from her, surrounded by boxes of evidence. "This is the most comprehensive corporate fraud case I've seen in 20 years. "I had time," she replied. 5 years of time. And motivation. The investigation revealed crimes beyond even what she had suspected. But the most devastating discovery was personal. Evidence that he had planned her pregnancy and abandonment as part of a financial strategy to avoid paying alimony. The child she carried wasn't just unplanned, she was inconvenient, a liability to be eliminated. Standing in the office that used to be his, surrounded by evidence of his crimes, she had to decide who she wanted to be. "I want him prosecuted," she told the federal prosecutors, "but I don't want him destroyed. I want him to understand what he did, to learn what I learned, that true power comes from lifting others up, not tearing them down." The company's transformation under her leadership became a case study in ethical business practices. Under previous management, you were treated as disposable resources. Under my leadership, you will be treated as the valuable human beings you are. The profits came naturally, not from exploitation but from innovation, from employee loyalty that translated into productivity. Have you ever seen what happens when a company is run with heart instead of just ambition? The business grew beyond what it had ever been under his leadership. He became a cautionary tale, a business school case study in how ego and greed can destroy even the most successful empire. The roles had reversed completely. She was now the success story. He was the footnote. Her daughter's inheritance was more than money. It was a company built on justice rather than exploitation, a legacy of strength rather than cruelty. "Mommy, why did Daddy throw us away?" "Because some people think power means taking things from others, but real power means giving others the strength to take care of themselves." The shelter she built from his former assets became her proudest achievement. Not just temporary housing, but comprehensive support. Legal aid, job training, childcare. Everything a woman needs to rebuild her life after it's been shattered. Every woman who walks through these doors is walking the same path I walked, from powerlessness to strength, from victim to survivor, from survivor to victor. His final recognition came during their only face-to-face meeting since the shareholder gathering. "I never saw you coming," he admitted quietly. "That was the point. You saw what you wanted to see, a desperate woman with no options. You never saw the daughter of a teacher who had learned to study patiently, the mother of your child who would do anything to protect her, the strategist who spent years learning your weaknesses while you dismissed her as decoration. I could have destroyed you completely," she said as their meeting ended. "I chose to let you live with the consequences of your choices, the same choice you gave me when you threw me pregnant and penniless into that storm. Have you ever realized that the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy, but becoming everything they could never be?" The crown she wore hadn't been taken from him. It had been earned through patience, strategy, and the kind of strength that only comes from having nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. His realization came in quiet moments between sleep and waking. Throwing her out hadn't been his moment of ultimate power. It had been the precise moment he signed his own corporate death warrant. Her transformation from victim to victor hadn't happened through revenge, but through becoming everything he could never be. The company name change ceremony was held on a Tuesday, the same day of the week when she had been thrown from his house 6 years earlier. Harrison Enterprises became Phoenix Holdings, with a mission statement that honored the daughter he had abandoned and the strength he had underestimated. His final understanding came through a letter his daughter wrote about heroes she had chosen to write about her mother. "My mum is strong because she helps other people when they are sad. She says everyone deserves to be safe and loved, even people who were mean to her." The Phoenix had indeed bought the ashes. But more than that, she had transformed them into something beautiful, something lasting, something that would protect other women long after both their names were forgotten. The suitcase that had tumbled down marble steps had been replaced by briefcases full of legal documents that protected thousands of women. Sometimes when someone throws you into the abyss, you don't just discover you have wings, you learn to soar higher than they ever dreamed possible. This story touches something deep in your heart, doesn't it? The part of you that has felt discarded, underestimated, thrown away by someone who should have protected you. Her story reminds us that our darkest moments often contain the seeds of our greatest victories, that the people who underestimate us give us our most powerful advantages, that sometimes being thrown away is the first step toward finding our true worth. The truth is, most of us carry suitcases full of broken dreams. Most of us have stood in the rain wondering how we'll survive what someone else decided we deserved. But this story isn't just about one woman's journey from victim to victor. It's about the choice we all face when life breaks us. She didn't just defeat her enemy. She transformed his weapons into tools of healing. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to rise from your own ashes, then share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is remind someone that they are not their lowest moment. They are the phoenix waiting to rise. And sometimes being thrown into the storm is exactly what we need to discover we were born to fly.